So thanks again for having me today, everybody, and making the time for this event. I'm going to get to talk about two things that I'm really passionate about. First is KPI design. I'm sure all of you are amazing at it, but we're going to talk about the maturity that it takes in any size organization to make sure that you're not just reporting on the weather, right? Your job, even though you're poring over data all day long, isn't to bring every insight that you have. It's about being able to tell a story about what you're doing with the organization and how it's pushing forward with a strategy and how those data points can help inform your next big decision. You have a lot of influence, and that's where storytelling comes into play. I've learned my lessons going into board meetings where I had all the data in my hand and I started to just rely on that and I lost my audience. There's nothing worse than going into a board meeting and you see someone checking their phone when you're doing all this awesome data reporting with them. So this is the V2MOM framework. This is definitely near and dear to my heart. If some of you are familiar with the company Salesforce, gosh, their stock's been kind of not doing the best lately, but they're a company that I bet on day in and day out. I worked directly for Salesforce. Marc Benioff, when he started that organization over 2 decades ago, he started with something called the V2MOM. It's your values to vision, methods, obstacles, and measurements. He wrote a plan, usually around Q3, end of Q3, going into Q4, that he writes a plan. He puts his V2MOM on paper and he publishes it to the whole organization. He started that from day one. Now it's a 77,000 person plus organization. And when I was there for 7+ years, we always were waiting for him to post his V2MOM, and then all of the executives would post theirs. And then all of the business units to follow, all the business operations units would follow all the way down to the IC level, and we would publish our V2MOMs. Why does this matter? It matters because that's the alignment layer, right? That's being able to say, I know what success looks like to him. It's maybe launching this new Einstein AI product. Okay. So if I'm in talent acquisition and I'm on the HR side of things, how do I make sure that we're bringing in the right data scientists, machine learning expertise to compete with other organizations that want to do voice recognition type technology? I needed to prioritize. That's the group that we need to hire for first. That's where I need to build my capacity and forecast to align with that specific goal. And that's how we were able to form our measurements of success. And so again, this is really important. If you're able to do this really, really well, your vision is kind of like your blueprint of where you're headed and what's the ideal outcome. So when you go into those board conversations, you're speaking their lingo and they're actually going to listen because it's how they're going to look good, right? So it's just these very subliminal things that are so critical, but they're very hard to do. They're very sophisticated. But if you can stop the world when we're all moving so fast and we got a million things on the to-do list and actually say, hey, why are we doing this? As you get into the values, this is a really key piece as well, because this is about how an organization figures out the risks they're willing to take. I'm going to pick on some companies that we're all very familiar with right now. Let's talk about OpenAI, okay? So OpenAI is putting ads into their technology right now. Claude, if any of you guys watched the Super Bowl, the ads were really fun to watch. You take a company like Anthropic that makes Claude, they were like, but we're not like them, right? We're not going to just give you ads and try to sell you stuff when you're just trying to get insights or data or move faster and be more productive. So they're obviously their values are different. The values that you can really pin down with your organization are going to help you decide your decision filters. Do we want to take these risks or not? Okay, getting into methods. Methods is really important. This is like, how are you going to achieve that vision? And then obstacles, again, this is like the hardest part, right? It's like being able to say, I'm going to spike the ball on the 1 yard line. I'm not going to just go for the score. And, again, I'm going to pick on OpenAI just because it's fun. But like they went for the big land grab, right? They wanted to get more users. They've done a fantastic job at that. But maybe they're starting to lose some of that market share right now. People are kind of looking at Gemini more. Apple's making choices about who they want to use. Is it ChatGPT? Maybe not. And these big companies are making these decisions right now because they know that some of those obstacles, those values are going to tie back to, will I bet my career on this stuff? Now you're in the finance field. You're in there explaining where these investments need to be and why they should be made and what's the ROI. So again, if you're calling out those obstacles early, you're going to remain like the most important voice in that room. Lastly, the measurements, right? This is the KPIs. This is what you show is, are we successful on this pathway to achieve that vision? So, the KPIs, if they don't ladder up to that V2MOM kind of framework or like what it is that we're doing this for, it's really just noise. All right, going into these board conversations and talking about KPIs, we're going to simplify things. We're going to give you those 5 building blocks. Love that. And so if you think about it and kind of tying it back to the Ready Layer 1 concept, because I love it, I'm all about data governance. What we think about for the company goals, that's your alignment layer. Everyone wants to know about revenue, right? That's a big leading data point per se. But what about your cost to serve, right? How are you maybe bringing that down? How are you making your teams more productive? I'm sure a lot of you in the finance world are like hoping for more automation in your life. How do you close some of those, end of quarter cycles faster? How do you eliminate some of that manual work that has to happen in the finance world? So, again, these are your leading and lagging indicators. Those are your signals. And so having, really smart ways to measure both sides of those are really important so you stay balanced. There's nothing worse than going to a board and saying, we're doing great. And then all of a sudden you miss revenue. There should be something that should have told you that was going to happen well before it happened. Visibility into those risks. That's your governance layer. If you don't have a committee today that has the representation across the organization, I know that, again, going back to like the whole tech industry, the thought process is, especially for a startup, we cannot have more engineers than we have salespeople. It should be kind of balanced, because if we're making really cool things, but we're not selling it, we're not going to make the money. And then what's it all for? You might have made the coolest technology in the world, but if you're not selling it, you're not getting people in the door to use it. You're not winning that market share. You're not going to be probably a very successful organization for long. Let's also talk about, four, you guys mentioned that in one of the pulse checks, clear ownership. And that's where, you need to really think about your operational and accountability layer. Are you talking to the right groups early enough so that you can control the narrative and understand the leading and lagging data that they're looking at as well? And then lastly, less KPIs, eliminating that noise again. That's going to make those narratives as crystal clear as possible.